Farm Journal Report on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by CropLife America. CropLife America knows that the Endangered Species Act work plan may impact how you manage your fields and pest pressures. Learn how we are fighting for practical solutions at www.croplifeamerica.org/ESA.
We didn't see just one major winter storm this week. We saw two. And as a combination of ice and snow paralyzed traffic across the U.S., it left behind a mess. And in the West, it was wildfires that caused catastrophe. So what's driving these severe weather outbreaks to start 2025, and what could it mean for the spring or even summer this year? That's this week's Farm Journal Report. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says a weather pattern that's very consistent with what you'd expect during La Nina started to unfold several weeks ago. And these episodic cold outbreaks are a trademark of what you'd see during La Nina.
It just so happens that this time we've got a couple of Pacific storm systems riding right along that boundary between the colder air to the north, the warmer air to the south. And that lead system earlier in the week really took advantage of that temperature gradient. And we saw just about every imaginable weather phenomenon under the sun over a period of a couple of days.
Rippey says even though it will be an active southern storm track for the foreseeable future, we aren't even in a full-blown La Nina.
Here's the thing. We have been talking about this La Nina, if you could believe this, for almost a year, going all the way back to February of 2024.
It looks like La Nina. It feels like La Nina, but it's not officially La Nina.
So you've got a lot of boxes checked off here that are consistent with La Nina. And I think the reason for that is even though surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific are not cold enough to officially define La Nina, we've got incredibly warm water surrounding that cool La Nina zone in the equatorial region.
But a bit of some confusion this week because the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center said on Thursday that La Nina conditions are present and expected to persist through February to April, saying a La Nina advisory is now in effect. But World Weather's Drew Lerner disagrees. He says even with the atmosphere acting like La Nina, it's not quite cool enough in the equatorial Pacific to reach the official definition of La Nina. And he says a full-blown La Nina, by definition, won't happen this year.
I don't think we will, because by definition, we have to have those ocean surface temperature anomalies in the eastern equatorial Pacific. That's from the international date line to the coast of South America, plus or minus 10 degrees of latitude across the equator. That little area has to have at least a half degree colder than normal surface temperature Celsius over a 3-month period of time. And we're not going to have it for 3 months. We're going to have it for a month, maybe a month and a half.
No matter if you officially call it a La Nina or not, meteorologists say these La Nina-like conditions could continue over the next few weeks.
I mean, I hate to say it, but nasty winters tend to give us a much better outlook for the next year. So, hey, let's keep these things going for the rest of January into February, too.
The moisture is helping drought conditions in parts of the upper Midwest and some areas of the plains.
But as you move to the south, that's where I have concerns. So you get into West Texas, Western Kansas, Western Oklahoma. All I can say is it's very fortunate those areas in the central and southern plains had a wet November, because it doesn't look good for the foreseeable future.
In the case of hard red winter wheat country, we did so well with precipitation back in November that we can go through the rest of winter without a drop of precipitation. And as long as we get into the warm season and we start getting a little bit of rain to fall, that crop is going to be in just fine shape.
But what about areas farther north, like Montana and the Dakotas? Well, Lerner doesn't expect widespread relief this winter.
We're getting some waves of snow to occur across that area, but it's a dry, powdery snow, and it's really not providing high volumes of moisture. This pattern will continue for the next several weeks, and so we'll put down a little bit more snow up that way. But as far as being able to get a big soaking rain type event, you're going to have to wait till the warmer days of spring.
Meteorologists say one thing we are seeing that's consistent with La Nina is the sharp dividing line between wetter conditions and drought. And NOAA's seasonal outlook shows that divide with below normal precipitation forecast for much of the Southwest and deep south over the next 90 days.
The problem is that even with weak La Ninas, you miss what's called the subtropical component of the jet stream. That's the one that goes from Hawaii through Mexico into Texas and finishes in Maine. And that's why we've had drought build into parts of the Southwest, where there's been major concern over Santa Ana winds and wildfires.
Those wildfires raged across Southern California this week, with horrific scenes captured as the high winds caused the fires to spread. But in Northern California, the first check of snowpack for the season showed snowpack levels in the Sierra Nevada 91% of average. That snowpack provides about 30% of the state's water needs.
So above the 80 corridor, got a ton of snow with those atmospheric rivers, but it was less and less as we moved south through the state. So the central Sierra region is about just below average right now. And the southern Sierra is about 75% of average. So that's a big difference throughout the state.
Lerner thinks parts of the upper Midwest and northern plains could see more active weather with rain into spring.
So I'm not too terribly concerned about the fact that we're still seeing persistent dryness in those areas. Not all of that region will get relief when we get to the spring, but I would say probably half to 2/3 of that region will.
But even with more moisture across other parts of the U.S., Snodgrass says he is concerned about drought this year.
We tend to be wet through the Mississippi Valley and east going into spring, lots of storms. But we tend to see the drought that's in West Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, the Sun Belt, expand up toward Colorado. Most models want to bring dry conditions out of the southern Canadian prairie into Montana. And if you just kind of see that, that's kind of funneling toward the western Corn Belt. This is the first time in fall and winter that I've been kind of saying, hey, I think our risk is elevated for drought.
He says looking back, 6 out of 10 years that we've seen a similar pattern like this, we've ended up with heat and dryness in key months like July and August.
I'll tell you the secret. This is what you got to watch. Gulf of Alaska. If between March and June, that's where it gets cold, the risk of drought in the Midwest goes way up. I think that's where our risk factor is going to be going forward. So, winter, but I'm more concerned about spring and summer.
But for now, Rippey thinks the winter of 2025 will be remembered for the extremes.
With this pattern set up, it's going to be too dry in the Southwest, stormy in the Northwest. Episodic cold outbreaks everybody remembers because especially embedded in an otherwise relatively mild winter, you really remember those hard hitters.
Well, when we come back, some major news out of Canada this week. A glimpse of Ag Around the Globe is next.